the PSAT, and standardized tests in general are still important to college admissions and scholarships. So 3 key reasons to take the digital SAT. Reason number 1 is that SAT scores impact college admissions. Acceptance rates at almost every test optional college are significantly higher for students who submit test scores than for students who do not submit test scores. Okay, so to break that down, that means that even though a college says it's test optional, the acceptance rate for students who have a test score is often much higher. Let me show you a study from the Compass Education Group that proved this. They looked at the acceptance rates of students who had test scores versus students who did not have test scores at test optional colleges, places like Emory, Notre Dame, my alma mater, USC, Fordham, Tufts, Amherst, Georgia Tech. And what they found was students who had test scores were accepted oftentimes 2 to 3 times higher, 2.0 times higher, 2.2 times higher, 2.7 times higher, sometimes 1.5, 1.6 times higher. But nevertheless, there's like a much higher acceptance rate when you have a test score versus when you don't have a test score, even though colleges claim they're test optional. Is that fair? Is that fair? Type a yes or no in the chat. Is that fair? Colleges say they're test optional, but then they are accepting students who have test scores at higher rates, right? So then why say that you are test optional, right? And if you ask the college admissions officer, what's the acceptance rate for students who have test scores, and what's the acceptance rate for students who do not have test scores to your university, my guess is most of the time they won't tell you. This took a lot of data digging to figure out, okay? So reason number 2 to still take the SAT, ACT, or PSAT is that SAT scores impact scholarships. I actually think this is a bigger reason to take these exams. If your student does not have a test score, you will not be considered for billions of dollars in scholarships from colleges and private companies, okay? Just to give you an example, how many of you guys are here from California? Type a yes in the chat for California. I know the California people are thinking, University of California is test blind. We don't have to worry about test scores. Well, wait, let's read the fine print on the University of California's website. Test scores could still be considered for other purposes, such as course placement, certain scholarships, and eligibility for the statewide admissions guarantee. Is that fair, guys? They say that they're test blind or test optional, but they're still considering test scores for scholarship eligibility, right? And so they don't tell you that. That's just on their fine print. Not to mention all the scholarships by SAT scores, automatic scholarships based on SAT and ACT scores, 20 scholarships for high ACT and SAT scores, 10 colleges with automatic merit scholarships. There are over $7 billion in merit-based scholarships awarded annually that your student is often ineligible for if they don't have an SAT or ACT score. All right. Reason number 3 is the resurgence of standardized testing requirements. Many universities have already reinstated standardized testing for admission due to worse outcomes for both students and colleges. And one of the primary reasons for this is because there's been massive grade inflation in the high schools. I know in the news, everyone talks about inflation, but no one talks about grade inflation. Parents, when you were in high school, was it difficult to get an A? Like, was it hard to get an A, or was every student getting an A? Nowadays, there's been, over the past 20 years in high schools, there's been so much grade inflation that 47% of all high schoolers graduate with an A average. I'm guessing about 47% or probably higher in this webinar because there's high achievers here. Probably over half of you have an A average, a 4.0 average or above. So if all of the applicants, not all, but 50% or more of the applicants have an A average, how can colleges differentiate which students to let in and which ones not to let in? The answer is they can't. And so that's why universities like Harvard and Caltech will require test scores for admission again. Yale's reinstated it. Dartmouth,